Hello guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. I'm in my kitchen today, which is different for my book videos, but honestly, I usually film these in my room in front of my bed and I don't feel like making my bed, so we're gonna do it here. Today is March 1st. It is that time again to do another reading wrap-up video. So today I'm gonna go over all of the books that I read in February. Even though it's a short month, I still managed to read a lot of books this month. I did 14, and I feel like it was a really good reading month too. Like I had a lot of books that I really enjoyed. I'm gonna pull up my Goodreads account so I can tell you exactly how I rated everything. My Goodreads is always linked down below too if you wanna add me as a friend on there. But yeah, starting back at the very beginning of the month, I started off with a bang. I had such a good first book of the month. I read The Match by Sarah Adams. She's the author of The Cheat Sheet, which I read last year and was just like so cute, and the cover of this book was so cute that I just like could not resist. Sarah Adams writes closed door romance, so romance books that have absolutely no spice. Like sometimes the spice is implied, but like it's like a fade to black type of thing. You're not getting any of the spice in her books, which honestly is kind of refreshing sometimes. It kind of gives those like YA book vibes where it's just like wholesome and it focuses so much more on like the characters and the plot and like what's going on, when you're not like wasting any other extra time or focus on any spice. Like don't get me wrong, I like some spicy books, but I also really enjoy like YA books or books like this that don't have any. And this book was just so dang cute. It was so cute and wholesome and just sweet. And it's about a girl who works for a company that trains guide dogs. She's had a service dog since she was like really young because she has epilepsy, and so she works for this company that helps match service dogs with people who need them. And she ends up helping this single dad who has a daughter who has epilepsy who is looking for a service dog, and it's their romance from there. And it was just so good. I feel like Sarah Adams is just like really good at writing those like giddy little romance books that have you like cheesing while you're reading them. It was really short. I think it was less than 300 pages, and it was just adorable. I loved the whole thing. Right after I read it, I gave it a 5 stars because I've been trying to be like less harsh with my ratings of books. I feel like I can be kind of tough with my ratings, but even though I really did like this book, I don't think I would still give it 5. It's a strong 4.5, but probably just not a 5. But I still really liked that one, and I highly recommend. After that, I had my first and only DNF of the month, which was By a Thread by Lucy Score, which I was so disappointed because I kept seeing Sarah Corelli talking about this book and she was like raving about it. She rated it 5 stars and I was like so excited. I just could not get into it. I don't know what about this book didn't work for me. I think it might have been that the characters were like significantly older than me, so it was like kind of hard for me to like, I don't know, like get in the zone of the book. The characters in this book are in their like early 40s, I think, and it's like a grumpy sunshine boss employee romance, and I just did not like it. I hated the main male character, and like even though they were supposed to be like in their early 40s or like whatever, early to mid 40s, they just like acted like children. And also this book was so long, so I DNF'd it at 32%. I was just so bored and it felt like a chore to read it, so I just let it go. And then after that, I listened to The Family Upstairs. This is a thriller by Lisa Jewell. This book was kind of wild and it went like a totally different direction than I was expecting. It was a pretty crazy ride. It's about this girl named Libby who was adopted as a baby. When she turns 25, somebody reaches out to her to let her know that she's inherited this house that was owned by her birth parents, and basically it was left in a trust to her that she would be able to get it when she turned 25. But she never knew her birth family, like nothing like that. This house, it's more like a mansion. It's massive. It's in like an amazing part of the city. It's worth millions of dollars, but it's also like abandoned and it's in like a really bad condition. As she's like getting ownership of the house and like kind of trying to like figure out what exactly happened there, because before it was abandoned, there was a lot of like really suspicious stuff going on in the house, like a lot of cult-like activity, but nobody like for sure really knows what went down in there. Yeah, it was actually pretty wild. And on Goodreads, I only have it rated a 3 out of 5, but like looking back, I feel like it was definitely more like a 4. This book was a journey. It was a pretty good thriller. It definitely kept me guessing. After that, I listened to another thriller. I listened to The Inmate by Frida McFadden. I love Frida McFadden's writing. She is like so good at writing a super twisty thriller that really keeps you guessing. So I've been really kind of working through all of her backlist. This is about a girl named Brooke who ends up moving back to her hometown after being gone for some time. Before she left town, she was involved in like an awful crime that happened with a bunch of people she knew. Some people were murdered. She was almost murdered. But years later, she ends up needing to move back after her parents pass away. And the only job she can find, because she is a nurse, is working as a nurse at the prison in the town. And she was really worried about taking this job because one of the inmates at the prison is her ex-boyfriend from high school who was involved in the crime incident that happened that caused her to move away. She hasn't seen him since the incident happened, so she does end up having to see him, and then starts finding out that maybe what happened at that situation is not what she thought. This one was really like interesting and twisty, and I feel like it started off really strong, and I was like so into it at first, but it felt like the longer it went on, like the more like ridiculous and outlandish it got, and it kind of like cheapened the book once you like got to the end. Like I felt like it was just ridiculous by the end. And the main character in this book is probably one of the dumbest main characters of any book ever. It was honestly just ridiculous how dumb she was. It was like, what are you thinking? So yeah, I ended up rating this one only a 2.5. It was just a little bit loony there at the end, but the epilogue at the end of the book was really good. So I don't know, I still would say that this one is like worth a shot. After that, I listened to yet another thriller. I feel like people ask me all the time how I'm able to read so many books in a month, and the answer is just that, like, one, I'm a really fast reader when I am actually reading, but I also do so many audiobooks. Like probably half the books I read this month were listened to on audio when I'm washing dishes or folding laundry or, you know, cleaning the house or whatever, driving in the car. Having an audiobook going, I feel like is a great way to read more, and it's just like, it makes doing like monotonous tasks more fun. So I'm just listening to thriller books in my AirPods all the time, and that's why I'm able to have so many books read per month. The next thriller I listened to was All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. I read her debut last year, A Flicker in the Dark, and that was a really good thriller, but I liked this one better. Although it was a little bit sad and hard to read about as a mom, because this is about a couple whose 1-year-old baby gets kidnapped in the middle of the night. And when you start the story, it's a year after the baby has gone missing and they still haven't found him. And so you're like getting the perspective of the mom who is just like obviously torn apart, doing everything she can to try to figure out what happened to her son and try to get him back. Since he's gone missing, her marriage has fallen apart. She's having like a horrible time sleeping. This one was really good and really twisty. The twist at the end got me really good. There were certain parts of it that I thought were predictable, but I feel like if you read a lot of thrillers, it's just too easy to predict it because you just know the formulas, you know? This one had a really good ending, and it really kept me kind of guessing the whole time. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5. I definitely recommend. After that, I read Darling Venom. This book has been on my TBR for a really long time, and I'm in a book club that this was the book for the month. So it's so nice when you have to read a book that you've been like wanting to read. I feel kind of like mixed opinions about this, but generally I did like it, but there was a lot of stuff that I didn't like about it. I don't know. Overall, I still rated it a 4 out of 5. It's probably more like a 3.5-ish. This is about a girl named Charlie who, when she's in high school, she's going through a really awful time after losing her parents, where she is feeling suicidal, and basically goes to the roof of her school because she is going to attempt to jump off of it. But when she gets up there, she meets another kid who is up there for the same reason, and they essentially make a pact to hold each other to not unaliving themselves. And so you're watching their story, meeting up with each other year after year, and everything that happens with them. I don't want to spoil too much, so I'm gonna leave it at that, but it does go kind of a totally different direction. Like I said, there was definitely a lot that I liked about it, and it made me pretty emotional at times, but there were some things I really also disliked about it too. But generally I think it's still worth the read. Then I read Every Last Word, which is a book that I see recommended all the time. This is a YA book. This is about a girl, Sam, who is in high school. She is kind of a part of the like mean popular girl friend group. They've just been like friends forever, and now that they are getting a little bit older and they are getting a little bit meaner, she's just like not quite clicking with them anymore. And she also has obsessive compulsive disorder and is kind of like afraid to open up to her friends about that. And then she ends up meeting these other kids at school who she kind of starts befriending also. Yeah, and the reason I really wanted to read this was because everybody was talking about how there's like a crazy twist in the book. I'm just such a sucker for a plot twist, and I'm always trying to like hunt it out. Because I knew there was a big twist coming, I was reading critically, like trying to figure out what it was, and I feel like I kind of ruined it for myself because it would have been shocking if I wasn't like searching for it like I was. Like I definitely figured out what it was before it came, which ruined it, I think. It was cute. There were things that were not so great about it, but generally it was like a really easy, fast YA, and I rated this one 3 stars. After that, I read Just Another Love Song by Carrie Winfrey. If you guys have watched some of my like book videos, I talk about Very Sincerely Yours by Carrie Winfrey. I read that one last year, and it was one of my like favorite books of the year, even though it was just like the most cheesy, ridiculous rom-com ever, but I loved it so much. And so I was excited to read some more of Carrie Winfrey's backlist. This one just didn't work for me, which is such a bummer because I feel like I had so many things going positively for it. It's about a girl named Sandy who pretty much just like never left her hometown. She was supposed to leave for college, and then because of her parents' finances wasn't actually able to go away to college and ended up having to stay and go to the community college in her town. And then she just basically never left. Her high school sweetheart, her high school boyfriend did end up leaving for college, and they ended up breaking up, and she's basically just felt like heartbroken over him ever since. This is literally like 15 years later in the story. He ends up moving back to the hometown also, and they, you know, have to see each other again after 15 years, and she's like never got over him, which was like the thing that just really didn't work about this for me so much. Is I think that it's so just silly and unrealistic and ridiculous to have a main character who is still pining after her high school boyfriend 15 years later. It's like, there's just no way. There's just no way. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I don't ever even think about my high school boyfriend, you know? It's just like, it's not, that part just felt like so outlandish to me that it was like kind of hard to get over. It was a second chance romance. It had amazing small town vibes. The way she wrote the whole town was just like so charming and just sweet, and it had really good side characters, also really good, cute, funny banter, which I feel like she's just really good at writing that like great banter between characters that is just like so funny and like witty. So it had a lot of pros. It had a lot of things that like were really good. The like pining for 15 years thing is just like absurd, and also it was just like kind of boring and like a little bit frustrating to read. I ended up only rating this one a 2.5 out of 5. It just fell a little flat for me. After that, I read another book that has been on my TBR forever, and that is Finlay Donovan is Killing It. I can't believe that I let this sit on my TBR for as long as I did because it was so good. I saw that it was on Kindle Unlimited, and I was like, okay, let me just give it a try. From the first page of the book, I was so hooked. This book did such a good job. It's just like completely drawing you in and making you so invested in the story. It's about Finlay Donovan, who actually just went through a divorce from her husband because he was cheating on her with a real estate agent. He's moved out, and now she is like struggling financially like crazy, trying to put her life back together after her husband left her for another woman, basically. She is a writer, but is having a really hard time like getting money for her books and like putting out books and everything as she's trying to like adjust to being a single mom of 2 toddlers. Right from the beginning of the story, you just like are rooting for her so hard because her husband is an asshole and his new girlfriend is an asshole, and you just like want her to come out ahead so bad. And basically she writes kind of cozy murder mystery books. She's at a meeting with her agent at Panera Bread trying to like work through some of the problems in her book, and they are like talking about like a murder. They're basically trying to like figure out how to like work through this murder, and I think they were talking about something like murder for hire. But so they're having this conversation and a woman overhears them and basically passes her a note as she's leaving, giving her like the name and address and information of somebody that she wants Finlay to kill, because from overhearing their conversation, she thinks that she is a contract killer, and is basically slips her a note and is like, I will pay you this much money to kill this person. So she gets the note and she's like, what the heck is this about? And out of curiosity, just like ends up kind of like looking into this guy, and then gets all caught up in a bunch of stuff that happens when she's like looking into that guy. And yeah, this book was honestly like a little bit chaotic. It was kind of a lot, and there was like kind of a lot to keep track of, but it was so fun and I could not put it down. I like could not wait to see what happens. Like I said, you're just rooting for her. So I gave this book a 5 stars. I was so impressed and I had such a fun time reading it. There's 3 books in this series and I couldn't wait to read the next one after reading that one, which I did actually just finish the second book in the series yesterday. That one is called Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead. This one was still good, but it just did not pack the punch that the first one did at all. Honestly, it felt like really kind of redundant and kind of convoluted. Like there was just like a lot going on and it was kind of a little ridiculous. I can't really say too much what it's about without spoiling anything from the first one, but it's just a continuation of the story and it's more chaos that goes on in her life. I think I physically read 8 chapters before I had to switch to the audiobook because I was feeling not super interested in picking it up and reading it. I gave that one a 3 out of 5, and I don't really feel super excited to get to the 3rd one. I want to do it because I just like to finish a series, but yeah, I'm not like jumping to read the 3rd one. After that, I switched up genres a little bit and I read Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. I actually listened to this one also, which I'm so glad I did, and I highly recommend, if you want to read this book, to try listening to it on audio, because this book is in the 3rd person and it's from a ton of different perspectives and there's a lot of characters, and like all of the different voices and everything in the audiobook was just really fun. It was a really good listen. I liked this book so much more than I was expecting. I gave this one a 5 stars, which is rare, and even like a couple weeks later, I don't want to adjust that rating. I stand by it. Like I think this was a really great book. This book is really hard for me to explain, so I'm just gonna read this little blurb. Viewing an apartment normally doesn't turn into a life or death situation, but this particular open house becomes just that when a failed bank robber bursts in and takes everyone in the apartment hostage. As the pressure mounts, the 8 strangers begin to slowly opening up to one another and reveal long hidden truths. Basically, a person tries to rob a bank and like it doesn't go well. They end up fleeing and they try to take cover in this open house going on at an apartment for sale, and they end up holding 8 people there hostage. It was honestly just delightful. It had me laughing out loud. There was also parts when I was like tearing up. It just really made you feel all the feelings, which I love in a book. So yeah, highly recommend. Try it on audio. 5 out of 5. After that, I read Mile High by Liz Tomford. This book and this series are just like kind of going viral right now. Like they're so hyped up. I see them everywhere. Everybody's constantly recommending them. So I was excited to read this. It is on Kindle Unlimited, which is great. This book is about Stevie and Xanders. Xanders is a hockey player in Chicago. He's kind of like the bad boy of his hockey team. Like he has like this really insane reputation for being like a womanizer and a bad boy. And then Stevie is a flight attendant on the like team airplane. So every time that they are traveling for games, she's the flight attendant on there. And she just really like does not take any shit from him, which he's not used to. He's not used to girls that aren't like fawning all over him. And she's kind of just like so not interested. I did really enjoy it, although it was like so unnecessarily long. This book was over 600 pages, which like it did not need to be. It could have been half the length and would have been like the exact same. I did generally really like it, and I liked all the like side characters and the story. I love a good sports romance. There were some eye roll moments and a classic 3rd act breakup that was just like so annoying. I do still think it's worth a read. It was pretty cute. I'd give this one like a 3.5 out of 5. And then I did end up reading the second one in the series too, which is called The Right Move, because everybody and their mother is talking about how they loved this one so much. Everybody is saying that they like this one so much better than the first one. So this one is about Indy and Ryan. Indy is also a flight attendant on the hockey team airplane with Stevie, so her and Stevie are like best friends. And Ryan is Stevie's brother, who is an NBA player, and he's like this amazing basketball player. Indy had come home from one of her like traveling trips. She came home a day early to surprise her boyfriend of like 7 years and found him in bed with someone else. And so her whole life is kind of like crumbling, and she basically has like nowhere to go, nowhere to stay. Stevie is like, you should stay with my brother, because she just moved out of her brother's apartment and knows that he has a spare bedroom in his apartment. So Indy moves in with Ryan, and then you can guess romance ensues from there. This one was not quite as long as the first one, but it was still a really long book. I think it was around like 500 pages, and it was really good. I was trying so hard to like it as much as everybody else, especially going into it. I was like, this is gonna be a 5-star read. I'm so excited to read this, and I did like it. But there was a lot of stuff I didn't like about it. Just a lot of stuff that didn't quite work for me. I did really like the characters, especially Ryan. He was such a good book boyfriend. I just didn't love it as much as like everybody else on the internet right now. I rated it 4 out of 5 on Goodreads, which I'm gonna go back and change to a 3. It just wasn't amazing for me, but it was good. I do still think it's worth the read, but that's my take on that. Then I revisited a DNF from last month. So if you watched my reading wrap up from last month, I DNF'd from Blood and Ash. I think I read like 25% of it and then decided that I didn't want to continue on with it last month. It was just like felt so boring and just really hard to get into, but I've just heard such amazing things about it, and I was still curious about it. So I ended up doing this one as an audiobook. If I'm trying to read something and it's hard for me to read, my next step is listening to it, and if I can't even listen to it, then I'm just done. So I did listen to this as an audiobook, and I was able to get through the whole thing, and it was pretty good. I'm trying to think of how I can explain what this book is about, because it's a fantasy book and it's the first in a series, and I felt like this was the most confusing book, which I understand, especially in fantasy. Like there's a lot of world building and a lot of like information that you have to like give people before you can like really get to the story and like get to the good stuff. But it's hard when like it's a whole book of just like, wait, what? And I felt like that's what this was. I ended up giving this one a 3 out of 5, which was honestly a little generous to give it a 3, because it was just like so hard to get into. And the love interest in this book has the same name as my son, and that was just like, bleh. I do plan to read the next one or listen to the next one, but it's not like in my immediate priorities to do that. So okay, after that I read Cruel Black Hearts. I had this one on my radar for a while too, because I knew it was like a serial killer romance. It's like a reverse harem serial killer romance. I read a few serial killer romances last year and I loved them. I was looking forward to this one, and it just really didn't work for me. It's about this girl, Stella, who works at a newspaper and writes a newspaper column about true crime, and she also has a true crime blog that she is like writing in all the time. She's just super into serial killers and true crime and all of that. And then she ends up meeting these 2 guys who are roommates, who she gets like romantically involved with, these 2 guys at the same time. That was like probably the only like redeeming factor of this book, was it had like really good spice. But those 2 guys are serial killers. When I started this one, I didn't realize that it was a series, and I think that there's like 5 books in the series or something. So this one like left off on a major cliffhanger, but I have no desire to like read anymore. So I'm just gonna be on that cliff forever, not knowing what happens next, because I just like don't care enough to like continue the series. It was just bad, and the main character had absolutely no personality whatsoever. She was like the worst character I've ever read about. There was like nothing to her, but then at the same time there's like supposed to be like all these people who are just like completely obsessed with her. Like that part was just like a little unbelievable, because she was just like so boring, and there was like nothing about her that like made her interesting as a character at all. The whole thing just felt silly and ridiculous, and I gave it a 1 out of 5. The last book I'm going to talk about for the month is The Hunting Wives by May Cobb. I listened to this one as well. This is like a domestic thriller about a bunch of housewives. Basically, the main character, Sophie, has moved to this small town with her family. They moved from like the big city to the small town to like raise their toddler, and she ends up kind of getting involved with with this other group of moms and women who get together and drink like crazy and do like target shooting, like they shoot guns. But one thing that was like not in the description of this book, and I hadn't really seen anybody else talk about when they were talking about this book, is that all of the women characters in this book are in their like 30s to 40s, and like some of them are sleeping with and involved with like 18-year-old high school boys, which totally caught me off guard when I was reading it and was just so icky. Yeah, and I feel like they never really like touched in the book about like how like messed up that was. But like basically these wives who are all like getting together and like drinking so much, which was just like, I'm 29 and I cannot drink like these like 40-year-old women are drinking. Like there's just no way. But yeah, basically they would go like drinking and clubbing and just like cheat on their husbands, and it was just like kind of wild. But then a body turns up at the place that they are all like regularly going and doing like target practice and shooting guns and everything. Like there is a person who is found shot dead in that area, and so there's an investigation that goes on to try to figure out like what happened and why. There's like this dynamic of all of these women who all are like sharing secrets about like cheating on their husbands and not wanting any of those secrets to get out. And so yeah, it was honestly, it was pretty good. It definitely like kept me hooked and I wanted to know what was gonna happen. But like women just like cheating on their husbands like crazy, especially with like the teenage boys, was just like so like not fun to read about. It kind of like ruined it a little bit. I feel like I hated the characters and I kind of hated the story, but it still was just like kept me so hooked and I wanted to know what was going to happen. It kept me guessing at like every turn. This is definitely one of the most unlikable main characters. She just made the worst choices and you were so frustrated being in her head and like watching her make these god-awful choices over and over. You're just like, why are you doing this? I ended up rating this one a 2.5 out of 5. Try it if you want, proceed with caution. Those are all of the books that I read in February. If you guys have read any of these, please let me know what you thought of them in the comments, or if you have any books that you think I should add to my TBR, let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram, and I will see you guys all in my next video.